Special guest here today, that in the flesh, is three-time. I put you in the copy. I really hyped you up. I said this is three-time NBA champion. Oh, by the way, all-star BJ Armstrong from the 90s Bulls. And we have a lot of kids. Okay, we have a lot of kids in the comment section that weren't around for the glory days Dynasty Bulls. So I wanted to turn this almost into some education, PJ, for the younger generation, because a lot happened when granted, I wasn't even in double-digit years left when you were playing, but I was just old enough to know what was going on and at least appreciate it. So let's spread the knowledge here today. And even before we get going on Last Dance stuff, I took the liberty of going to your Basketball Reference real quick before we went live. And did you know in your first 7 years in the league, do you know how many games you missed total?
I have no idea, Rob. What? I'm sure you do. I'm sure you know.
Well, you only missed one game in 7 years. One game in 7 years is impressive. You have 82 games played technically that you were active for the first 7 years of your career. And when we live in the age of load management,
right.
You're playing 55. They just don't play because they don't feel like it. Why is it so much different now than it was then? And you're the perfect person to answer this because you currently represent clients in today's age, but you played during the 90s too. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it was just a different time and a different era. And, back then I learned from the veterans, right? I learned from watching Michael and Bill Cartwright and all the veterans. You took so much pride in just showing up to the game. And I took a lot of pride in figuring out, that was my job. That's what I got paid to do. And I remember when I first came in the league, I wanted to be a professional. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a professional. Look, you weren't going to play well every single night. I wanted to play well, but before I could even do that, I had to show up to the game. So having the opportunity and the mindset, and I wanted to have the mental toughness to say, I'm going to find a way every night to be the best teammate I could be. And the best way to do that is to show up and be there for your team. So I took a lot of pride in playing as well as I could every single night, knowing that, some nights you're going to have it, some nights you're not, but at least I showed up for my teammates.
So that's important because we watched the first episode of The Last Dance, and I got to say that Jerry Krause caught a lot of flack. For whatever reason. I don't know if the way the edit was done, but he caught a lot of slander, at least from the Twitter timeline, BJ.
Right.
And I want to do him a little bit of justice because he's not around to defend himself anymore, which makes it a little difficult in how you because also Jordan has a lot to say and he's got the final cut on it. That the bottom line is that he was the man responsible. He was the architect of creating a dynasty that won 6 titles. That's just a fact. The way you interpret it, that's a fact. You put a period on it. And in addition to that, relating to you specifically, he used his first round draft pick when Michael Jordan was surging to superstardom at the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. He goes with the 18th pick in the first round. He says, I'm taking PJ Armstrong. So that doesn't happen by accident. So I'm kind of curious as to what your opinion was of him. And did you feel the pressure from Jordan to stand up against him like we've seen as a theme throughout the first couple episodes?
Well, when I got there in Chicago in 1989, I was drafted along with Stacey King and Jeff Sanders. So we had 3 draft picks in the first round. It was very apparent the first day on the job that we had an opportunity to win and that it was going to be business, right? It wasn't you're coming in to figure out who or what you could do in this league. We have to figure out how to perform. And that was the bottom line. So performance was the X factor when I came into this league as a young player. And I had to figure that out. Either I was going to sink or I was going to swim, right? As a rookie, we're going to throw you out there against Isaiah Thomas and the Detroit Pistons. Let's see what you can do. And if you can't get the job done, let's shuffle the cards and figure out who can get the job done.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really concerned with anything that was going on off the court because this group, led by Michael Jordan and the veterans that we had, they made it very clear. Everyone has a job to do. When we get in between these lines, we have to figure this out. And if we don't figure it out, you know what? there's going to be some more trades, some more movement. So again, I was thrust into an environment where I had to learn what this business was all about. And this was a business that was built on either you're going to win and get the job done or you're not. And I thrived in it. I accepted the challenge. And luckily for us, we were all at that point in our careers where we were ready to win. We wanted to be coached. And more importantly, our best player had done everything that he needed to do individually, right? Michael had won all of the individual awards. Michael had won, he had already, I think probably at that time, I think he had won an MVP, or maybe he was right on the verge. But when you put everything in perspective, he was ready to win right now. And you're only as good as your best player in this league. And Michael knew that, he wanted that. And as they say, the rest is history.
So is it an accurate statement to say that despite whatever transgressions, spite he may have had for Jerry Krause during his playing days, he did put winning above all? That ultimately all that matters is you come in and you do your job. I'll deal with Jerry later.
Well, when you're a professional in professional sports, right? And what attracted me to sports was like, God, I had these fantasies. Oh man, I love playing. We all have such fond memories of our days as playing sports, whether you played in high school, whether you played in college. But when you play professionally, I think you saw it there it was talked about in the first two episodes. Michael Jordan, when he got hurt, he saw what this business was all about. It's a business. And the eye-opening experience for all of us that come in is you have to really understand, like, sports is one thing, the business is another.
Right.
And that to me is the difference. So it wasn't necessary for me to agree with management. It wasn't necessary for me to agree with what the coach was saying. What was necessary was we had a job to do, right? And I was getting paid to do a job. And that's what a professional is all about. So we had 12 individuals on that team who understood whatever was going on off the court wasn't going to affect what was going on in between those lines. And that was the difference between us and other teams. All these teams are very talented, but we had a group of individuals that didn't allow anything to go on outside of the court. Now, were we aware of what was being said? Yes. Did some people like some people in the management and some people didn't? Yeah, that's possible. But to us, when I looked at Michael, when I looked at Scottie, when I looked at Horace Grant, okay, I couldn't let that get in the way of what we were going to do there. So we had to be present in the moment. And that's what I think separated us from all of the things that were happening outside of our locker room.
So let's pick up right there, because you're sent into this, I'm going to say shitstorm, even though things are going well. This shitstorm of everything that's
well, it's not really. I'm going to tell you, to be honest with you, you go through the season, right? You go through these 82 games, right? And it looks exciting on television. That's a funny thing. When you see it on television, you go, oh, wow, they're in New York tonight, and they're in LA the next night, and they're in wherever they're going. It's not. It's like, to be honest with you, you need that, right? You need these distractions to keep you grounded. So the chaos is what, look, I'm going to say it here. The chaos is what we all thrived in. We understood that you need that. You need those things to keep you to keep the humor, to keep you on edge, because if you get comfortable in this league, you're going to fail. And I'm going to share this with you here. One of the things that I don't know if it's going to be expressed. I haven't watched it. Haven't watched the episodes yet because I'm a little nervous about them, but that's another topic. Is when I came in the league, it was very apparent to me that this was how I was going to get through it. You never trust being happy. You never trust it, right? So if you won 5 games in a row, you couldn't trust it. If you lost 5 games in a row, you couldn't trust that. So learning never to be happy is kind of the way you get through this. So when we had things, management and happen or whatever, it was like that was the great equalizer to being an NBA player. Is like that gives people to talk about something else, that gives them a distraction, and I can actually focus in on just playing basketball. So the chaos and all those things we owe that to the media. We owe that to the fans because
Right.
it worked for us.
Okay, so I'm going to pick up right there because you're drafted into this league in 1990, and it's the summer of 1990, BJ, that MJ famous. This is after they lose to the Pistons,
Right.
In the Eastern Conference Finals. He famously demands no vacations, nothing for any of the players. We're going straight to the gym. We're working out. And you come in, I believe, as a rookie that summer. You're like, hey, aren't I supposed to like get my apartment first before I start working out with you guys? Did MJ demand even you as a rookie to come in and participate in those off-season workouts? And if so, what was that gym like?
Well, leadership is really probably one of those, it's like a mystery. Like, what is it? How do you do it? How do you get it? Everyone talks about wanting to win and the competitive spirit. When I came in, there was no jokes, right? You know what I mean? When I say there's no joke, we had a great time when we were together, right? There was a lot of laughing, messing around, but we knew what we were there to do. And there is a window, right? And there was a sense of urgency that we all played with. Michael had an injury before. So at any point, anytime you have an injury, it gives you a new awareness of like how fragile this could be. And we had guys who had been in the league 8, 9, 10 years. Bill Cartwright had been around. John Paxson had been around, and Craig Hodges had been around. And we had some young emerging players. And this one emerging player was Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen wasn't the Scottie Pippen that we know now, a top 50 player of all time. Scottie Pippen was this young emerging player. Horace Grant was a young emerging player. I was an unproven rookie. So what was it like coming in? Well, I had to understand working hard was one thing, but I had to get the results that we were all looking to get. And we had to all learn how to play with the expectations, right, or championship or bust. That's a different mentality than saying, we just want to be a playoff team. We had the mentality of championship, or we're going to find some other people or make some trades or whatever managers were going to do to get a group that can actually get the job done. So we all felt that sense of urgency, but more importantly, we all took on the challenge. And that was what I learned most, was that I remember in the summertime as a rookie, after, my first year before we won our first championship, everyone took it upon themselves to do what they needed to do to perform. And this was the first group of individuals or teammates that I had where we actually policed ourselves, right? We didn't need the coaches to tell us what to do. We didn't need the management to tell us what to do. We didn't need people in the media telling us that we need to work hard to do this. We made sure that we all held ourselves accountable. And the championship, yes, they are won in June. But for us, the real championships are won before you even play the first game. Right. Because those guys, each and every one of them made a commitment to putting in the necessary time and effort to be a champion before we even played our first game.
So you put in all that work, talk about self-policing. People are in the comments section right now saying this poor guy had to guard Isaiah Thomas multiple years.
No, well, that was like, welcome to the NBA.
Yeah. But as I read that comment, I'm like, wait a minute. I know what's coming up this week on The Last Dance because we saw the preview. It's going to be some talk about the bad boys here. And I'm like, well, the bad boys did beat up on the Bulls a little bit, but they eventually got their way and they ended up overcoming the feat of defeating them in the Eastern Conference Finals. So it's famous at this point already. It's more infamous than famous, but the Pistons walk off the floor after defeating them. We know what MJ and Scottie felt because they still talk about it to this day in documentaries throughout time. But you're a young player in this league that was participating in that moment. What did you feel when you saw the Pistons just walking in front of you without the traditional shaking of hands, or when let's say a soldier like surrenders, you're supposed to have like a soldier's death per se, right? You're supposed to be some honor amongst warriors like that. So what was your vibe as that was occurring during one of the most infamous moments in NBA history?
Well, Rob, that was playing against Detroit was, I'm from Detroit, right? I grew up a Detroit Pistons fan. My whole family were Detroit Piston fans. I was probably the only player on the Bulls where my family was like, "Hey, I hope you play well, but I hope the Pistons win." Right. So that's that was kind of the pressure behind the scenes that I was getting. And yeah, they were joking, but they were serious, right? And all of us know it's a Detroit versus everybody type attitude there. So what was it like for me? On one hand, I understood exactly what was going on. And the one thing growing up as a Detroit Piston fan is I had a firsthand look at the mental toughness that this team had, right? The
Right.
Detroit Pistons, let me just take my emotions out of it. The Detroit Pistons were a terrific, terrific team. They had Hall of Fame, they had really all-star players, Hall of Fame players. They had a Hall of Fame coach. They were a physically tough group. And they had a lot of, that's why they got the name, the Bad Boys. Physically, they were tough. But what they really were was they had the mental capacity to just wear you down. And their true gift, if you're asking me, right? And I don't know if it will be shown in the documentary, is it was like mental warfare. They were mentally going to wear you down. That's where their strength was at. Mentally, they had the toughness to just wear you down and do what was ever necessary. So what was it like for me? I got it. They were still there, but physically they couldn't match us physically, and they knew that, but mentally we were right there with them.
Right.
That's what allowed us to really beat this team. Okay, they mentally they could, they would rough us up, they would do these things, and we would react. Suddenly, there was no reaction to us. And Rob, I'll say it here: the one move that really allowed us to win was when we put Scottie Pippen on Bill Laimbeer. Now, why is that important? Because we were able to take away something from them that no other team was able to do, which was the high screen and roll. Because Bill Laimbeer was one of, or perhaps he might have been the first pick and pop 5 guy in the NBA. And that was always a problem because Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars and Vinnie Johnson, the microwave, you couldn't switch the screen roll. When we put Scottie Pippen on Bill Laimbeer, that was a game changer.
Yeah.
Suddenly we could dictate and we didn't have to react to anything they were able to do. And because Bill Laimbeer wasn't going to okay, they run a 1-5 screen roll with me guarding Isaiah. They run the screen roll. It wasn't like Bill Laimbeer was going to dive into the post and the Pistons were going to have a steady diet of feeding him the ball in the post. That was the game changer. So mentally, we had the mental capacity to play the games within the games. And we got to a point to where now we could match them intellectually.
Yeah.
Mentally, we could challenge them. And then physically, our gifts, because we didn't have one player who could create off the dribble. We had 2 players, right? We had Michael and Scottie. And once we figured that out, then we were able to really display our dominance. And the Pistons weren't ready yet. In my opinion, they weren't ready yet. Mentally, they weren't ready to say the run was over. And I got it. It wasn't personal. It wasn't here. Look, I'm friends with those guys, Joe Dumars. There's a level of respect here. And that's why it is what it is, right? But at the same time, you know what? The cameras and television sometimes will show something that you couldn't see. And what you really couldn't see was a very prideful group who they weren't ready yet to stop competing.
Right.
But we now had matched everything that they could do physically on the court. Mentally, we were there, and there was no reaction to anything that was going on, right? Whether it was a push, a shove, a screen, whatever, we could dictate the outcome of the game by the matchups that we had. And that was one of the key elements for us in winning that series.
That's interesting that that's not even a small ball approach because Scottie's not a small guy, but Bill Laimbeer was a true center, man.
Yeah.
Putting Scottie Pippen, who got knocked down more times, flagrant fouled more times, and wouldn't even say a word and get back up. It was almost just the mental, like Laimbeer probably had to be like, you're putting Scottie on me? Right. You're putting him on me? And then he quickly realizes, oh, I see why you're putting him on me. One, because he'll take anything that I do and give it back to me. And two, he's got the pure basketball physical ability to just guard me from the outside too and take away what we do best. So
yeah.
Beat them at their own game. It's like we said you're going to try and beat us mentally, but we're better than you physically and on the court. But we're going to take away your mental advantage by just messing with Laimbeer's head as much as possible here, and it obviously worked, which is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, truly, we can talk about the physical, the pushing and the fouling and all that. That was great. The truth of it is that we had two masterminds or geniuses. Both of these guys were masters. Chuck Daly was a master. I mean, he had a concept and an idea of the game that was beyond. And Phil Jackson is a master of the game. And the details in which we had to play those games was beyond anything that I ever have been a part of since. And really, when you see the details in which we were talking about every single possession, the Pistons had discipline. And when I have the utmost respect for that group is because they were the first group that forced us not to be perfect, but we had to be excellent. Okay, Rob, it's impossible to be perfect.
Yeah.
But we had to be excellent at every single thing we did, right? If there was a loose ball, we had to be excellent in getting that loose ball. If there was a chest pass that needed to be made, we had to make the proper pass at the proper time. They forced us to be prepared to do what was ever necessary to win the game. And every single move, we're talking about every move that was made with one idea: to win the game, right? You weren't doing anything that wasn't going to be with that idea. And they brought that out in us. And once we learned what mental toughness and how to execute that, now we had something special. Now Michael Jordan was playing the game at an entirely different level. Scottie Pippen and the rest of us all knew now what was needed because we could play the game mentally, and we mentally challenged ourselves from that point moving forward.
So the mental, I'm going to continue just to echo what you're saying about mental here, because you have Michael Jordan, who's a great talent. You have Scottie Pippen, who's an emerging great talent at that point. But the perfect storm is brewing here, BJ, of between Pippen and Jordan's public relationship with Krause. You got the bad boys beating up on you, and for a couple of years, and it's really pissing Jordan off to the point that he says no vacations, we're going to the gym and we're practicing all summer, and he puts on a ton of weight so that he can physically be ready just for the Eastern Conference Finals a year in advance. At that point, he had to wait another year to get there. The documentary will fast forward because they only have an hour to show us that. But there was a full season which Jordan had to go through just to get that rematch in the 1991 Eastern Conference Finals against them. So it's almost like the bad boys and Krause, they've created this pulling out the beast inside of Jordan for that mental advantage, because he may have always just been this great player who's a volume scorer. He had that reputation until he actually won a title. Great player who's just really good at offense. We can name Lord knows how many players in today's NBA that people unfairly put those characters into that bucket. But the difference was when you unleash the mental part of Jordan, that's where he separated himself with you and the rest of the team on creating this dynasty. And I feel like it was so many different factors as you continue to talk about it that went into this. And I'm going to have you retell the story just of how long this lasted in Jordan's mind all the way through 1998 when he retired from the Bulls the second time. You were on the Hornets, if I remember correctly, and you have told me the story of when he saw you on the court during that season. What happened next?
Well, Michael was always looking for a competitive advantage, right? And whatever advantage he could get, he was going to take. I mean, that's his makeup. And I think you're referring to when we were playing and he knew that we were going to potentially see them in the playoffs. He knew, you know what, I want to lay the foundation. And he said it, right? He wanted to make sure, you know, it's really funny because I've been on both sides, right? I was on the side as a teammate, and then I was on the other side playing against them. He wanted to make sure you never came into a game thinking that you had an opportunity to beat him. And somehow, some way along in his journey, he figured out that one of the keys to success is first, you got to have the confidence to do it. And if he could put any doubt in your mind, he was going to do that, right? There was a mental warfare that was constantly going on, right? Everyone thinks he's talking trash. The trash didn't bother him because he could take it, right? What he really wanted to do was to see your response. The response is what he wanted to see because that determined your level of confidence and the belief that you had in yourself. You know, he had unwavering confidence.
Right.
His confidence was unwavering. And what he said to me was he wanted to see, did I believe that we could beat them? It was real simple. And now I know him, so I have no response, right? There's no response. If you really want to play against him, right? And I knew this, you just don't respond. You don't respond. Now, you know, it's the poker face, right? And you have no response. So these are the things that I knew. I knew that about him. He wanted to test me, what was I going on? You know, like, yeah, we can talk afterwards. We can talk afterwards and we can have fun and we can do, but when we talk about this, there's no response. And it was funny because he was egging me on because he knew exactly what I was doing. I knew exactly what he was doing. And it was just funny because, you know, that's him. And I've seen it for decades. And, you know, I was like, okay, all right, let's move on. We'll see you when we see you guys in the playoffs.
And did he ever get you, before we move on, did he ever get you with, we see him gambling against security guards with the hat ball thing on the Jumbotron, and he's throwing quarters against the wall and stuff. Did he ever get you into one of those games?
You know, I don't want to disclose all of the things we would do during the timeouts. but you know what? You know, I hope people get a chance to see. I mean, he's got to say it because it's not my place to say it. But he was very intense. Don't get me wrong. He's very intense, and that's what he did. But he was really, really funny because the things he would point out during the game were just like hilarious. It was like, because you're thinking like, okay, here we are in the middle of a game, and all of a sudden he would just say the wildest things, or, you know, the Jumbotron is going on and he'll be like, focus on that. Like he could multitask, you know, he could have the you know, he could look up on the screen and then he's talking to Phil, then he's talking to us and he's like, oh, by the way, you know, who's getting ready for what? That's just who he was. He was a real fun person that way. And hopefully you'll get a chance to see it because he had not only was he intense, he had another side to him as well that we all came to respect and not make him just be this guy who was always just, you know, wound up all the time, but he had a very funny side about him.
Well, BJ, we appreciate you dropping in here with all these stories and whatnot. We got just a couple of minutes here before Zoom's going to kick us out. And I wanted to ask you, before we let you go, just about your current profession here. You've got a laundry list of high-profile clients that are currently playing in the NBA now during your agency role with Wasserman. And I'm just kind of curious as to what's your pulse of how the players are going to react to returning to action here from the quarantine. Do you speak to them every day? Are they working out? Are they just sitting around on the couch? What can we expect as fans from these players just in terms of their mentality when the season does return?
Well, I think, you know, this is uncharted territory for all, right? For athletes, for everyone. And when you really look at the spectrum of what has occurred, you know, this is a global, you know, pandemic, right? We're all trying to figure this out as we go along. I really don't know what to expect because safety is first. And what I can say is the concern of families, you hear that in the players, concern for the communities they play in. And most importantly, you know, you don't want to put anyone at harm. right? We take this very serious. The players take it very serious. I think the NBA with Adam Silver, they've done an amazing job of informing the players, the communities, the league, their fans, and to be responsible and really play their role in trying to have a view of not only what's going on in this world, but all, because this is going to affect us all. So it's been great. And I think the players understand the magnitude of what's going on. And I think that started with our leadership from the teams, the owners, the players, and we're all just doing our part. And of course, they would love to come back and play. But at the same time, we're all like, you know what, it's time to get out of yourself as far as being in that athletic mode and say, you know what, this is bigger than all of us. And we have to play our part in the communities in which we all live in.
And how long would you need to get back into game shape for the season to start? Do you need 2.5 weeks of training camp? Do you need a week? What is it?
Well, yeah, I think you're going to need more than that. I think you're going to probably need at least 4 weeks or so, right? Yeah, but because you're going to get back, you don't just get back and start to running. You have to. These players haven't had an opportunity to really play, right? Where are they really training, right? Working out and doing the treadmill is totally different when Steph Curry is coming at you full speed, right? There's no preparation for that. There's no preparation for Kyrie Irving and these marvelous athletes. So they're going to need time to get their bodies back. They're going to need time to get in the condition that they need. And more importantly, you have a team, right? So you don't just like come back and play and then, you know, it's they're not robots. They have to come back, play, ease their bodies back into it. When I say ease, you know, get your body back to the grind of playing. And it's easy. Once you're in shape, you're great. But it only takes 2 or 3 days to get out of shape. And none of these players, none of them, I know they're working out and doing those things, but that's a different ball game when you have to go out there and play in a game.
You know, I could ask you questions for the next 24 hours, I feel like. You could deliver answers, man. But you have been so gracious with your time here and answering everything that we want to know about the Last Dance, the 90s Bulls, and all the above. And we still got a whole bunch of people here commenting in both Twitch and Periscope. And I told you before that they value your time.
No, thank you.
First of all, thank you.
Thank you
for blessing us. And we want to know, where can we find you? Because on top of being a 3-time champion and a full-time agent and working at a marketing company and all the above, DJ, in addition to this, creates content as well. So please let us know where we can support you at, your handles, all the above.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at BJ, doing and keeping up with the latest, and more importantly, just, you know, following people like yourself on Twitter. And then I do a podcast called Pushing Through. So at Pushing Through, the podcast here, where we have content, we have guests, and you know, we just try to be funny and a little entertaining. And in between the entertainment, we try to drop a nugget or two. So, but more importantly, we're here and we're out there.
So that's not just words, because we do action on this Periscope as well. So that's at Pushing Through and at BJ Armstrong.
Yes.
At Pushing Through, just like, this is a free cast to watch, right? If you could take 15 seconds out of your day to go rate, give him 5 stars, and help him promote his podcast. We like to go above and beyond here to show what we're actually worth. So get into iTunes and Spotify, drop BJ a high rating for telling us these stories today. And BJ, we appreciate, again, everything for you coming in here and being so not only gracious with your time, like I said, but just open with the stories and not giving us PC.
Yeah, it's sorry. You know, it's funny watching these, you know, watching the documentary. You just start recalling things. And on our last podcast, we had Jason Ayer, the director, was on the podcast. And if you get a chance, you know, he was terrific, shared stories, things that didn't even make the cut. So if you want to really get even a behind the scenes look, please tune into that one. So it's great. Thank you for having me. You do a great job. And I study you because you are so funny. Your humor comes out on all of your social media stuff, and you do an excellent job on social media.
Well, thank you for the compliment. You have completed the impossible task of impressing the comment section. They're actually asking for you back, because they're they want to slander you first and foremost, above all. Trust me.
Well, let's do it because, I'm old. I'm over 50. So anytime young people ask me to come back, you know what? I definitely would do it. So I'm putting you in charge of getting me back here on Periscope and all the other social media platforms.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's BJ Armstrong, the Chicago Bulls and NBA and everything else that he does. We appreciate you guys stopping by, and we'll talk soon.